Why didn't any of the major motion picture companies want to make this film? Because the answer to that speaks volumes about the agenda in Hollywood and the fact that nobody would touch this movie.
Well, you know what? I think that pissing off the left is a winning strategy. I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken.
Hello, and welcome to Weird Wednesday. So, Tara, I feel like there have been so many cultural shifts happening over the past few weeks, and conservatives are definitely winning the culture battle, or at least in my opinion. So let's just dive into like all the different things happening right now, because there is a lot to unpack. So we'll start with the huge momentum from the movie Sound of Freedom. And this movie, like, it just crossed the $100 million line, surprising everyone with the success because, you know, all over the country, I don't know if you had heard this, but I had been seeing people posting like all over TikTok, going to various AMC theaters to see the movie. And then there would be weird things happening, like the air conditioning wouldn't be working just in the theater where Sound of Freedom was playing, or like the film would start glitching and they would have to turn it off, and just like weird things like that happening. So people were like, is this on purpose or is this just a coincidence? But there's been a lot of glitches like that. So it's great to see that the movie is having a huge success. Now, it made $14 million and change on its first day in theaters, while the new Indiana Jones movie made $11 million domestically. So we'll get into Disney and like their whole disastrous agenda in a minute. But first, let's look at how the MSM has been covering The Sound of Freedom. So Rolling Stone, no surprise, put out an article. It was written by Miles Klee, and it basically sums up what the left and the mainstream media think of this whole topic. So the title of this article was Sound of Freedom is a superhero movie for dads with brain worms. The QAnon-tinged thriller about child trafficking is designed to appeal to the conscience of a conspiracy-addled boomer. Tara, I didn't know child trafficking was a QAnon thing. I thought child trafficking would be something that, you know, despite whatever political side of the aisle you're on, we can all agree it's a huge problem and it should be stopped. But like the way that Hollywood and the media are responding, it seems like the left is turning into the party that supports child trafficking and pedophilia, and like the right is the one that's standing up for kids, and not just with trafficking, but like we've done many episodes on the whole trans agenda. And I think people are starting to lean more right because no one wants to be associated with something so evil towards children. Is that a conspiracy?
Yeah, totally. Right. I think honestly, the reactions from the left are just bizarre. And it speaks to the absolute corrupt state of the people in power in this country and the delusional public that believes that what comes out of the MSM is the truth. And while this movie is itself fiction, it's based on the true experiences of a former Homeland Security agent, Tim Ballard, and his investigations into child trafficking. And that all eventually led him to leave his job at DHS and start this nonprofit group called Operation Underground Railroad. And I'm sure that a lot of liberties were taken in the storytelling to make it more sensationalized because it's a fucking action adventure style movie and it's not a documentary. But the topic of the movie is based in fact. And just like all child trafficking that is taking place with all of these kids coming across the border that you and I have talked about extensively on this podcast, right? And like, I will preface my commentary by giving the disclaimer that I have not seen this movie, which I'm kind of ashamed of because it's a really good movie from what I hear. And having worked in Vice for several years as a cop and dealing with human trafficking firsthand, I would really like to watch this. But I quite literally haven't been to a theater in over 7 years.
I don't think many people have. Like, I think COVID kind of ended that for most people.
Yeah, even pre-COVID, because I didn't live anywhere near a theater. And until something comes on like Netflix or HBO, I don't see it. So I honestly can't speak to the movie. But what I will comment on is that the responses from the libtards who believe this is based on QAnon theory and that child trafficking isn't a very real thing that's happening in this country and across the world. Because the real question is like, why didn't any of the major motion picture companies want to make this film? Because the answer to that speaks volumes about the agenda in Hollywood and the fact that nobody would touch this movie.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen it either, but quite honestly, like I don't know if I can stomach it. I mean, like I'm already very aware of human trafficking just due to this podcast and like all the different things that we, have to research and talk about. And I just don't know if I want to put myself through that movie because like I don't know, it's such a difficult subject, but I do think it's a great way to wake people up to these real issues that we should be focusing on. And like you're absolutely right with Hollywood. Like where are all the do-gooder actors that are like constantly, saying that they want to save the world and help all the, people in the world? Like why haven't they spoken up? Like not only have they not spoken up, but it's like no one in Hollywood even wants to acknowledge that this is a real problem that exists.
Yeah, and they actually finished production on this movie 5 years ago in 2018. And I think at the time they were working with 20th Century Fox, who had the rights to the movie. But then Fox was purchased by Disney in 2019, and Disney did nothing with it. So this movie has basically just sat on the shelf at Disney collecting dust because they're too preoccupied with making cartoons pushing the trans agenda and having Black kids sing really creepy and disturbing songs about slavery and reparations. So it wasn't until Angel Studios picked it up and they had to use equity crowdfunding to finance getting it into the theaters. So again, why wouldn't major studio executives like jump at the chance to distribute this film, especially if it's supposedly just a fake action adventure thriller with no basis in truth, right? That's Hollywood. And it's because they know that the theme and the topic in this movie is the truth, and that highlighting child trafficking, which basically boils down to legitimate slavery and child abuse, is actually a fucking heinous crime. And bringing attention to this topic would expose the truth, and it would expose all of these people to a wide ranging audience. Because I'm sorry, it's about sex trafficking and pedophilia, and there's no such thing as a fucking minor attracted person, despite how much this administration wants to normalize that concept. I mean, for God's sakes, we have a president who can't even control his creepy impulses to inappropriately touch and sniff children on national TV. I mean, seriously, I'm not wrong, am I?
No, I just saw that video the other day. It was like a the compilation videos that they do. And it was Biden and all of the different hair sniffing videos. And it's so creepy.
Yeah, it's disturbing. And Stephanie, have you like ever gone into a rest stop bathroom?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So I mentioned this because I just came back from a road trip to Arkansas and I'm still trying to do like at least close to my 120 ounces of water a day. So I had to stop and pee a lot on this road trip because it was like 10 hours there and back. And I literally went to every rest stop, and every single one of them, there's always signs on the back of the stall doors about human trafficking and how to report human trafficking. And most of these are like state mandated notifications. And one place that I went even had a sticker for an organization called Truckers Against Trafficking that was like on the backs of all the doors, because truckers are the eyes and ears of the highways. So do you really think these notifications would be plastered all over bathrooms at every rest stop across the country if interstate and international child trafficking wasn't a fucking problem?
No, of course not. I mean, our own administration admitted to losing 85,000 children.
And speaking of that, and creepy Biden, here's something that you may not know, and I bet most of our listeners don't know this either. But I recently watched an episode of it's a show called Facts Matter with Roman Balmakov, and he was talking about how the Hollywood elites and those in power didn't want this movie to be made, and he brought up the Biden admin's role in the trafficking of migrant children across the border and how these 85,000 children went missing. And he mentioned a point that even I was not aware of. So I want us to take a quick listen to this clip.
And unfortunately, In the year 2023, well, it's not really a big surprise that the mainstream media, as well as Hollywood elites, look down their noses at this kind of an effort to expose a topic that in any other day and age would have had widespread support across the country. That is unfortunately not surprising. However, what is surprising is that the US federal government is seemingly taking steps to avoid responsibility for their contribution to this problem, the problem of child sex trafficking, as a result of their lax border policies. Specifically, as was reported by the Gateway Pundit, the Biden administration's Department of Justice recently eliminated several paragraphs of language regarding child sex trafficking and child victims of prostitution from a government website. And this came shortly after they lost track of, quite literally, 85,000 migrant children. Now, that report, it showed that prior to May 12th of this year, if you went on over to the Department of Justice's website under the child sex trafficking section, well, it included several subsections on international sex trafficking of minors, domestic sex trafficking of minors, as well as child victims of prostitution. However, for some reason, after May 12th, it appears that all three of those subsections were stripped away from the webpage. If you go to that website today, you will not see them. And as of today, no rationale or any specific reason was provided by the federal government as to why those subsections were removed.
They took information off their website.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing. Why? Why would they do that if they weren't somehow involved in all of this? I mean, that is so telling. And it makes my blood boil.
Yeah, and this article that he was referencing from the Gateway Pundit, it came out on July 11th, so you can look it up. And it's very obvious, like, instead of calling attention and awareness to child trafficking by supporting this movie and by keeping valuable information on their website, they hide the facts, they say it's a QAnon conspiracy, and then they focus on fucking up our children even more by pushing these bullshit gender theories that defy actual science, while they celebrate and promote the trans agenda that's literally destroying our youth. So fuck off, Brandon.
And why are they even politicizing this issue? Like, shouldn't this be the one thing that every single human being can just agree on? The fact that they're fighting about this topic and this movie, it just speaks volumes. And it makes me really think that these are the same people that are involved and, I would say, profiting from human trafficking.
Definitely.
And speaking about the whole like screwed up trans agenda with young kids and everything, Bud Light stock continues to plummet. And now Governor DeSantis is suing Anheuser-Busch for causing Florida's pension fund to drop due to they're invested in Anheuser-Busch as part of the fund. And because of this whole partnership with Dylan Mulvaney that started this boycott, I guess he's trying to say that, they should have known this was a bad marketing ploy or whatever. So he's suing them. And here's the whole thing with Dylan Mulvaney. It's not even necessarily that he's trans or like supposedly trans, but he's clearly like not the demographic of Bud Light. And it's almost like Bud Light just said, screw our core customer, like almost like mocking them and basically letting the world know that they care more about their ESG score than their loyal customers. And here's what's interesting. Okay, the whole ESG thing was pushed by Larry Fink of BlackRock, which we've talked about many times before. Well, now Larry Fink is saying that he is no longer going to be using the term ESG because he says, quote, it's been misused by the far left and the far right. I'm not blaming one side or the other, but it has been totally weaponized. And Representative Andy Barr of Kentucky said in an interview with Yahoo Finance, quote, the pendulum swung too far, arguing that asset managers have been too responsive to pressures from the left in recent years. And he said they didn't know that there would be a counterweight. And I think they've learned that. And that's like my whole point with today's episode is I think everyone's underestimated how many people still are like not even right-winged. I feel like just moderate or even people that were Democrats before. They don't want this woke bullshit. And it's just been, completely underestimated. So I think this is a win for conservatives, moderates, like basically anyone that's not extreme left. And I'm sure they'll replace the term ESG with something equally woke, but it did make me happy to hear that there is an overwhelming number of shareholders that are being very vocal, speaking out against ESG. And one of those, again, was Ron DeSantis, who I guess I knew he had pulled money from BlackRock, but I didn't know it was $2 billion of Florida pension funds from BlackRock. So that, I mean, that speaks volumes.
You know who's not pulling from BlackRock?
Who?
California.
Who? Oh, yeah, no shit. Oh my gosh, I know.
Glad I don't live there anymore.
Seriously, they're just I can't even get into that conversation right now because it's like so absurd. I'm sure they want the ESG thing to go further than it already has. So there is a new boycott though. And this one is from the other side. So CMA, Country Music Awards, right? That's what it stands for. And they have like the CMA channel or whatever. Well, they just boycotted Jason Aldean's new song, Try That in a Small Town. So, in true Bud Light fashion, they're passing off their main customer base and going for like this woke, agenda that this song is somehow racist. And fans ended up responding right away because this song is now one of the most popular songs. According to Billboard Hot 100, it's the #2 spot, which I guess is really unusual for songs that are only a few weeks old. And what's interesting is the song soared to that spot after the left started complaining about it, saying that it's racist or whatever, I guess because it refers to the BLM riots. So it appears that when right boycotts, the whole woke agenda, it ruins a company. But when the left starts boycotting something that's conservative, it ends up like helping them and it becomes a huge sensation. And Aldean responded to all the criticism that's been going around over the past week. And he tweeted, quote, "In the past 24 hours, I have been accused of releasing a pro-lynching song, a song that has been out since May and was subject to the comparison that I was not too pleased with the nationwide BLM protests. These references are not only meritless, but dangerous." Well, you know what? I think that pissing off the left is a winning strategy. And again, I think this is another point for conservatives.
Yeah, and apparently this song is also the #1 song on iTunes. And he had a concert last Friday in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he gave a speech to the crowd where he talked about how he's proud to be an American who loves his country, he loves his family, and he'll do anything to protect that. And he wants to restore America to the way it was before all this cancel culture bullshit. And the crowd went totally wild in response. And they were shouting and chanting, USA, USA. And he said, like, well, do y'all want me to play the song? And of course they went wild again. So he played the song. And I thought it was great because instead of getting up there and making an apology, he stood up for what he said. And thousands of people were in total agreement with him. And I think Cincinnati's a fairly liberal city, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think pretty much every big city tends to lean a little more left. So,
Yeah. And that, certainly didn't seem to be the case at this concert. But the absurdity of the whole thing to me is that, like, this song was about how he grew up. And it was about how people in small towns take care of each other. And it doesn't matter what your skin color is or what your background is or your beliefs. And it's just like, this is the neighborly thing to do. This is America. This is what we're supposed to be about. We take care of our neighbors. And there's like nothing racist in this song unless you're a libtard who hates America and patriotism. And what I find most ridiculous is that the video was comprised of actual footage from the 2020 riots. All those, quote, peaceful protests that took place across the country where people were burning buildings and setting police cars and businesses on fire and violently attacking people, the summer of love. Like, so it's okay for BLM and Antifa activists to actually go out and commit this shit, but you can't put the footage of it in a music video without the left calling it racist. Weird.
come on. Like everything has to have some hypocrisy in it, But I mean, I get the left getting, I mean, I don't get it, but it doesn't surprise me that the left is pissed off at this. What surprises me is that CMA is like booting him off of whatever program. And then there's other country stars that are like speaking out against him. And I'm just like, really? Aren't you supposed to stand for like the small town, vibe and everything? Like, it's just so bizarre to me. But what you said about the concert reminds me of what I just saw recently. I think it was UFC, where it was comparing um one of these like packed, UFC fights when it was the last election, and apparently people in the crowd were screaming like fuck Trump or something, and then you go to this one and it was the opposite. Everyone was like USA, USA, and everyone was like roaring for Trump. So again, like, I think things are really shifting, and we're just seeing it left and right. I mean, we talk about politics all the time, but here we're seeing it in music and in film, and whether it's an adult movie or kids movies or anything in between, like, we are starting to see this shift. And we've got to get into the other movie that is like getting so much attention from everyone, which is Barbie. And I'm actually going to see it tomorrow, by the way. I'm bringing my daughters. They're excited. And I've heard like, oh my gosh, I've heard so many comments on this. Like, some people are saying it's super liberal and there's like this whole liberal agenda. But then there's other people who are conservative saying like, I don't know what they're talking about. This is actually like a pretty standard take on what you would think would be in a Barbie movie. But I can tell you what I know they did right before even seeing the movie. They picked characters, first of all, that looked like the iconic Barbie we all remember. And in a time where we're not even able to define a woman, I love that this movie has themes of like female empowerment and uses real women to play Barbie.
Wait a minute,
And
wait a minute. Wait, are you saying that there's no trans Barbie in this movie?
I don't know. I mean, I did hear, I think they may have thrown a trans Barbie in there somewhere, like just for good measure. But here's the thing. Like, I don't really think that anyone cares as long as it's not like shoved down our throats and trying to completely corrupt kids. You know what I mean? Like, so I think there's a way that you can add in some diversity or whatever with maybe a trans Barbie. But if it is in there, and I'll let you know once I see it tomorrow, it wasn't like in your face from what I've heard from all the different commentary that's been going around. But I can't remember, Tara, the last time that someone was so excited about a movie. Like, everyone's talking about it. Everywhere you go, you see promotions and collaborations. It's like this, I can't remember. It had to have been before COVID where a movie was publicized so much,
Okay, I clearly live out in the middle of nowhere because I really didn't know there was a Barbie movie.
No way. You have not heard about this?
No, not at all.
Oh my God, you must be living under a rock out there in Texas. Come on. So no, it's been like everywhere, and they've been talking about it for a while, and I don't have the stats on it yet because it like just came out. But I think that Disney could learn a lot from the success of Barbie. And when you look at how their last 8 films tanked, maybe they should take a look at a film that's doing really well that appeals to, both kids and, parents. So I think the whole idea with Barbie and then with everything that Disney's been trying to do centers around nostalgia. And I think that there can be huge success with that, right? Because it's like people love things that remind them of their childhood and simpler times. But when you attempt to remake a movie, as Disney did with like the Little Mermaid and many other films, you make major changes to the character and the plot, it's not going to have that nostalgic effect. Like, it does the opposite. It pisses people off because it's messing with your memory. It's like messing with the way you remember it from when you were a kid. So like, it makes me think about when Netflix rebooted Full House and it was called Fuller House. And it got a great response from people. Like everyone was talking about it. And it's not because it was a great show. Like I watched it with my daughter and it was pretty cheesy, but all the characters looked the same. The house looked the same. Like their attitudes, everything was the same. And it really resonated with people because it brought them back to their childhood. And I feel like that's what this Barbie movie is doing. And I would think that, Disney would learn from this, but they've already announced that they are remaking Snow White. And okay, Tara, remember the famous line from Snow White where it's like, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?
Yeah.
Skin so white as snow. And like she's literally called Snow White because her skin's as white as snow. Well, anyhow, they cast a Latina actress to play Snow White. And remember, like the best part of Snow White was like the seven dwarves. It was like literally called Snow White and the seven dwarves. Well, they are not going to allow any like little people to play the seven dwarves. They're going to have just like normal height men, I guess, as the different dwarves. So, like, once again, they're immediately messing with major components of a movie from childhood. And I can just tell already, like, people probably won't like it. People are already talking about how this is stupid. And with their stock being just completely downgraded, they need to come up with something better. Like, either have a new story and make a new movie that is a different title, different everything. Or if you're going to remake something and you want that nostalgic effect, don't change everything about it. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't understand why this is such a hard concept.
Yeah, and while you were talking, I just pulled something up really quick because I wanted to see about this Barbie movie. And I guess they have already made 377 million in their opening weekend.
Damn.
Yeah. And it said it surpassed every Marvel film released this year to become the biggest opening of the year. So that's pretty awesome. I was trying to see whose movie it was because obviously it's not Disney. But speaking of Disney, so they're losing literally hundreds of millions of dollars on their most recent films. And I think it's somewhere around 900 million for just the last 8 releases because they've all been pushing this fucking gender ideology and shit that people don't want to see in a Disney film. And their park attendance has taken a big hit. Millions of people have pulled their Disney Plus subscriptions. And even the Wall Street Journal put out an article a couple weeks ago with all these statistics indicating that Disney park attendance has gone down by 50%. And the president, Bob Iger, was saying, oh no, this is because of the price and affordability, and it's just not as accessible to people anymore. But I think that's bullshit. And I read that Disney has lost over $75 billion in market capital, and yet they continue to double down on this far left agenda. And what's even more disturbing is the corporate president of Disney. Her name is Carrie Berg, I think. And she's apparently like a self-proclaimed mother of 2 queer children, one of whom she calls transgender and the other is pansexual. And she made a statement that she wants a minimum of 50% of Disney characters to be LGBTQ or racial minorities. And I'm sorry, your revenue is showing that clearly America doesn't agree with you.
Well, yeah. And then don't make a movie called Snow White where it's like a super pale white woman. You know what I mean? It's like that just doesn't make sense to me. It's like just come up with like a new movie. Like I don't understand why they're doing that. And I'm sorry, but whose child even knows what pansexual is? And why are they announcing that as a child? Like that seems like some child abuse to me. I mean, that's pretty fucked up. But I think that Hollywood and Disney included, I think it's dead. I really do. I think that we see these huge budget movies tanking aside from Barbie. You have the actors and writers strike, which means there's probably going to be nothing for a while. No shows or movies from like the main Hollywood studios. And I think this is going to be a huge opportunity for these smaller film companies like Angel Studios to come in and take over the market. And, Hollywood is losing their power, just like the mainstream media has already lost their power thanks to podcasts and social media. So I think that this shift is going to keep becoming more and more and more apparent. And I don't know, I'm loving it. Like, I think in 2020, it may have been cool or seemed cool, at least, to be liberal and to protest and all that kind of stuff. But in 2023, it's no longer cool to be woke. And I'm pretty happy about that.
Me too.
So I'll let you know about Barbie. I'm going tomorrow. And I think it's good. I think I've been asking, like, where are all the feminists with this whole trans agenda? And I think it's great to have a movie with a bunch of females. So I hope it has a good message, and I'll keep everyone posted. And we will see you back here for Freedom Friday. Thanks for tuning in. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.